Johannesburg, 1982. A city bustling with life, energy, and the complexities of a society grappling with its own internal struggles. The streets were filled with the sounds of daily life, the hum of cars, the chatter of people, and the distant echoes of a city that never seemed to sleep. The world watched in awe as a massive alien spacecraft settled over the city. It was an unprecedented event, something out of the realm of science fiction, now a stark reality. The sheer size of the craft was overwhelming, casting a shadow over the city and its inhabitants. Hope filled some hearts. Was this first contact, a benevolent species arriving to share their technology? The possibilities seemed endless. People imagined cures for diseases, solutions to energy crises, and a leap forward in human understanding. The air was thick with anticipation and dreams of a brighter future. The answer was far more complicated. The ship was no sleek vessel of exploration. It was a hulking, damaged city in the sky, filled with refugees, the remnants of a dying civilization. The once grand ship now bore the scars of a long and arduous journey, a testament to the struggles faced by its inhabitants. Inside, a horrifying discovery awaited. The aliens, quickly dubbed Prawns for their vaguely crustacean appearance, were starving, sick, desperate. Their eyes told stories of suffering and survival, of a journey that had taken everything from them. They were not the advanced beings humanity had hoped for, but rather, victims of circumstances beyond their control. They were not conquerors, but refugees clinging to life. Fear replaced hope. The initial excitement gave way to a sobering reality. These beings were in dire need of help, and their presence posed questions humanity was not prepared to answer. Humanity, faced with the unknown, reacted not with compassion but with suspicion and fear. The sight of the alien refugees stirred deep-seated anxieties and prejudices. People began to question the intentions of these new arrivals, and fear quickly turned into hostility. The South African government, already grappling with the complexities of apartheid, faced a new crisis. What to do with these unexpected visitors? The political landscape was already fraught with tension, and the arrival of the aliens added a new layer of complexity. Officials debated and argued, trying to find a solution that would address the immediate needs without causing further unrest. The world held its breath, waiting for humanity to prove itself. The moment of truth had arrived. Would we rise to the occasion and extend a hand of friendship, or would we succumb to our baser instincts? The eyes of the world were on Johannesburg, and the decisions made here would echo across the globe. The government's response was swift and decisive. They quarantined the ship and its inhabitants, cordoning off a massive area around the landing site. The quarantine was meant to be a temporary measure, a way to control the situation while more permanent solutions were considered. A temporary solution, they claimed, until a more permanent arrangement could be made. Makeshift shelters were erected and the aliens were confined to a designated area. The initial promise of a short-term fix began to wane as the days turned into weeks. But as weeks turned into months, the temporary became the permanent, setting the stage for a tragedy decades in the making. The once hopeful arrival had turned into a prolonged crisis with no end in sight. The world watched as the situation deteriorated, a stark reminder of the fragility of hope and the enduring shadow of despair. With each passing day, the hope that the aliens would move on dwindled. The initial optimism that greeted their arrival had long since faded, replaced by a grim reality. The aliens, once seen as potential allies or even saviors, were now viewed as a burden. Their presence, initially a source of fascination, had become a daily reminder of humanity's shortcomings and failures. The ship, immobile and decaying, became a stark reminder of humanity's failure to rise to the occasion. Once a marvel of alien engineering, it now stood as a monument to neglect and decay. The once vibrant lights that adorned its hull had dimmed, and the advanced technology within had become a relic of a forgotten promise. It was a silent testament to the broken dreams of both the aliens and the humans who had hoped for so much more. The quarantined zone, hastily erected and poorly planned, transformed into a sprawling slum. What was meant to be a temporary solution had become a permanent scar on the landscape. The makeshift shelters, constructed from whatever materials could be scavenged, offered little protection from the elements. Garbage piled up in the streets, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. It was a place where hope went to die, and where the dreams of a better future were buried under the weight of daily survival. District 9, they called it. A name that was meant to bring order to chaos, but instead became synonymous with suffering. It was a place where the lines between right and wrong blurred, and where the rules of society seemed to no longer apply. The entrance to District 9 was a gateway to a world that most people preferred to ignore, a world that existed on the fringes of their consciousness, a place of squalor, desperation, and simmering resentment. The overcrowded conditions bred disease and despair, and the lack of resources led to constant conflict. The residents of District 9, both human and alien, were trapped in a cycle of poverty and violence. It was a place where the strong preyed on the weak, and where the concept of justice was a distant memory. The aliens, malnourished and living in deplorable conditions, became a burden, a problem to be managed, not a people to be helped. Their once proud and advanced civilization was reduced to a shadow of its former self. The lack of proper nutrition and medical care took a heavy toll, and many succumbed to illnesses that could have been easily treated. They were no longer seen as individuals with hopes and dreams, but as a collective problem that needed to be contained. Their strange biology and unfamiliar customs only amplified the fear and prejudice they faced. The differences that once sparked curiosity now fueled suspicion and hatred. The cultural clashes between humans and aliens were frequent, and often violent. Misunderstandings and mistrust led to conflicts that further deepened the divide between the two species. The aliens' unique abilities and technologies, instead of being celebrated, were viewed with fear and envy. They were not human, and in the eyes of many, that was reason enough to treat them as less than human. Discrimination was rampant, and the aliens were often subjected to brutal treatment. They were denied basic rights and freedoms, and their voices were silenced. The prejudice they faced was not just from individuals, but was institutionalized, embedded in the very systems that were supposed to protect them. The South African government, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the situation, turned to a private corporation, Multinational United, or MNU. The authorities, unable to cope with the growing crisis, saw MNU as a lifeline. However, this decision would have far-reaching consequences. The government's abdication of responsibility marked a turning point, as the fate of the aliens was handed over to an entity driven by profit rather than compassion. Tasked with managing District 9, MNU saw not a humanitarian crisis, but a business opportunity. The corporation's primary goal was to exploit the situation for financial gain. The welfare of the aliens was secondary to the pursuit of profit. MNU's involvement brought a new level of exploitation and abuse, as the corporation sought to extract as much value as possible from the alien population. The aliens, with their advanced technology, were a potential goldmine, ripe for exploitation. MNU's scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to unlock the secrets of the alien technology. The potential applications were vast, from military advancements to commercial products. However, this relentless pursuit of knowledge came at a great cost to the aliens, who were often subjected to inhumane experiments and invasive procedures. And so, District 9 became a microcosm of the world's inequalities, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both compassion and cruelty. The stark contrast between the wealth and power of MNU and the poverty and suffering of the aliens was a glaring indictment of the world's priorities. It was a place where the best and worst of humanity were on full display, where acts of kindness were overshadowed by acts of cruelty. The aliens, once symbols of hope and the unknown, were reduced to refugees, scapegoats, and lab rats. Their dreams of a new beginning were shattered, and they became pawns in a game of power and greed. The experiments conducted on them were often brutal and dehumanizing, stripping them of their dignity and humanity. They were no longer seen as beings with their own rights and identities, but as tools to be used and discarded. Their fate, intertwined with the ambitions of a powerful corporation and the indifference of a fearful world, hung precariously in the balance. The future of the aliens was uncertain, and their survival depended on forces beyond their control. The world watched with a mixture of fascination and apathy as the story of District 9 unfolded. It was a story of lost opportunities, broken promises, and the enduring struggle for dignity and justice. MNU wasted no time in consolidating its control over District 9. They erected fences, established checkpoints, and deployed a private army to keep the aliens contained and under their thumb. Their mandate was ostensibly humanitarian, to provide food, shelter, and medical care. But the reality was far more sinister. MNU's true interest lay in the alien technology, particularly their weapons. These weapons, reliant on alien DNA for activation, were useless to humans, or so they thought. Behind the facade of humanitarian aid, MNU conducted horrific experiments on the aliens, trying to unlock the secrets of their technology. The aliens, powerless to resist, became victims of MNU's greed. They were subjected to medical testing, their homes raided for any scrap of technology, their pleas for help ignored. The corporation, driven by profit and operating with impunity, held the power of life and death over the inhabitants of District 9. The situation in District 9 was a powder keg waiting to explode. The aliens, pushed to their breaking point, grew increasingly desperate. And within the heart of MNU, an unwitting pawn was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Wikus van der Merwe was, in many ways, a product of his time and place. Born and raised in Johannesburg, he grew up in a society deeply divided by racial and social lines. The remnants of apartheid still lingered in the air, shaping the attitudes and behaviors of those around him. Wikus, like many others, absorbed these prejudices without question, seeing the world through a lens of us versus them. A low-level bureaucrat in MNU, he was more concerned with paperwork and protocols than the plight of the aliens he was tasked with relocating. His days were filled with forms, regulations, and the endless grind of bureaucratic procedures. To him, the aliens were just another task to be managed, another box to be ticked off in his daily routine. He saw the prawns as a nuisance, a problem to be solved, not as sentient beings deserving of compassion. The slums where they lived were eyesores, blights on the cityscape that needed to be cleaned up. Wikus never paused to consider the lives of the aliens, their struggles or their feelings. To him, they were simply obstacles in the way of progress. When MNU won the contract to relocate the aliens from District 9 to a new camp even further from the city, Wikus was put in charge of the eviction operation. It was a task he approached with a sense of duty and efficiency, eager to prove himself to his superiors. The operation was massive, involving military personnel, heavy machinery, and a small army of bureaucrats. He approached the task with a bureaucratic zeal, more concerned with following procedure than with the human cost of his actions. Each eviction notice handed out was a small victory, a testament to his ability to get things done. He took pride in his work, seeing himself as a model employee, a shining example of efficiency and dedication. He saw the eviction notices not as decrees of displacement, but as triumphs of efficiency. Each one was a step closer to completing the project, to achieving the goals set by MNU. The human, or rather alien cost of these actions was something he chose to ignore, focusing instead on the metrics and milestones that defined his success. He saw the fear in the aliens' eyes not as a reflection of his own actions, but as further proof of their alienness. To him, their fear was just another sign of their otherness, a confirmation that they did not belong. He never considered that his actions might be the cause of their fear, that his role in their suffering was something he could change. He was, in short, the perfect cog in MNU's inhumane machine, a man who followed orders without question, who saw efficiency as the highest virtue, and who never stopped to consider the moral implications of his actions. In the grand scheme of things, he was just one small part of a much larger system, a system designed to exploit and oppress. But Wikus, for all his flaws, was still human. Beneath the layers of bureaucracy and prejudice, there was a heart capable of empathy, a mind capable of change. He was not beyond redemption, not incapable of seeing the error of his ways. The potential for transformation was there, buried deep within him, waiting for the right moment to surface. He was capable of change, of empathy, of seeing beyond the prejudices that had been ingrained in him since birth. It would take a monumental shift, a profound experience to awaken this potential within him, but the seeds of change were there, waiting to be nurtured, to grow into something new and transformative, and his transformation when it came would be as sudden as it was profound. It would shake the very foundations of his beliefs, forcing him to confront the reality of his actions and the true nature of the aliens he had so long despised. This moment of awakening would be a turning point, a catalyst for change that would alter the course of his life forever. For fate, it seemed, had other plans for Wikus van der Merwe. Plans that would take him on a journey of self-discovery, of redemption, and of profound change. He would be forced to confront his own humanity, to see the world through new eyes, and to find a way to make amends for the wrongs he had committed. He was about to become both the problem and the solution, the villain and the hero, in a story that was far bigger than himself, a story that would challenge his beliefs, test his resolve, and ultimately redefine who he was. In the end, Wikus van der Merwe would find himself at the heart of a struggle that would change not only his life, but the lives of countless others.